Some stories aren't meant to be forgotten. They linger in the shadows of abandoned places, waiting for someone curious enough or foolish enough to uncover them. This is one of those stories, a tale of a vanished village, a dried well, and a secret so dark that even the earth itself tried to bury it. What you're about to hear isn't fiction, it's a warning. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Are you alone right now? And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button below. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. We have more chilling stories waiting for you. Now let's descend into the truth. The town of Millbrook Ridge sat 40 miles west of nowhere, tucked into the folds of the Appalachian foothills like a secret the mountains wanted to keep. Population, 312. That number hadn't changed in 20 years. Not because people stayed, but because nobody new ever came. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where the diner served the same meatloaf every Thursday, and where the only excitement came from high school football games that nobody really cared about. Detective Sarah Brennan hated places like this. She'd grown up in Boston, spent 15 years working homicide in Philadelphia, and thought she'd seen every shade of human darkness. Then the department offered her early retirement after the Garrett case, the one that ended with her gun drawn on a 12-year-old boy holding a toy pistol. Clean shoot, they said. Justified, they said. She still heard that kid's mother screaming in her sleep. So when Chief Marcus Webb called her about a consulting job in Millbrook Ridge, she said yes. Small-town police work, missing persons case, easy money. A chance to prove to herself she could still do the job without seeing ghosts in every shadow. She was wrong. Sarah pulled her '08 Ford Explorer into town on a Tuesday morning in late October. The sky hung low and grey, pregnant with rain that refused to fall. Main Street stretched before her like a movie set from the 1950s, perfectly preserved and utterly lifeless. A hardware store with faded red awnings, a post office with an American flag hanging limp in the still air, a church with a white steeple that needed paint. The police station was a converted firehouse, red brick with tall windows that reflected nothing but clouds. Chief Webb waited outside, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent too many years squinting into the sun. He wore his uniform like it weighed 100 pounds. Detective Brennan, he didn't offer his hand. Appreciate you coming. Call me Sarah. She locked her car, though she suspected that was unnecessary here. Your message said something about a missing teenager? Webb's jaw tightened. Let's talk inside. The station smelled like old coffee and older secrets. Webb led her past empty desks to a back office cluttered with filing cabinets and yellowing maps. He closed the door and gestured to a chair that had seen better decades. Emma Kowalski, he said, sliding a photograph across his desk. 17, disappeared 6 days ago. Sarah studied the photo. A pretty girl with dark hair pulled into a ponytail, brown eyes that looked somewhere between defiant and afraid. The kind of kid who probably couldn't wait to leave this town. Any signs of struggle? History of running away? No to the first. Yes to the second. Webb leaned back in his chair, which creaked in protest. Emma's run off twice before. Once, when she was 15, made it as far as Pittsburgh before her aunt brought her back. Second time was last year. Got picked up hitchhiking in West Virginia. So why do you think this time is different? Webb pulled out another file, this one thicker, older, because of where she was last seen. He unfolded a hand-drawn map, crude but detailed. It showed Millbrook Ridge and the surrounding forest, with various landmarks marked in fading ink. In the northeast corner, someone had drawn a small cluster of squares and written 2 words in red: Hartwell Site. What's Hartwell? Sarah asked. Hartwell was a logging village. Existed from 1887 to 1952, had maybe 200 people at its peak. Then one day the whole place just stopped. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Stopped. The lumber company went bankrupt. No work, no reason to stay. Within a month, every family had packed up and left. Nearest town absorbed what was left. Hartwell became a ghost, and Emma was out there. Webb nodded slowly. Emma and 3 of her classmates went hiking out to the old site. It's become something of a local dare among the teenagers. The ruins are mostly collapsed now, but there's one structure that's still partially standing. An old well house. Let me guess. She never came back from the well. Her friends did. Emma didn't. Webb's expression darkened. They said she wanted to explore the well itself. Said she'd heard there was something down there, something from the old days. Sarah felt a familiar prickling at the base of her skull, the same instinct that had kept her alive through a dozen dangerous situations, the one that whispered when something was very wrong. What did her friends say happened? That's the problem. Webb pulled out witness statements, his hands shaking slightly. They all tell the same story, word for word, like they rehearsed it. Emma climbed down into the well using an old rope. She called up that she could see something. Then she screamed. When they looked down, she was gone. Ooh. Gone. The well's only 30 feet deep. They could see the bottom. There's no water, hasn't been for decades, but Emma wasn't there. They called 911. We sent 2 officers out immediately. They rappelled down, found nothing. No Emma, no sign she'd ever been there. Just dry stone and dead leaves. Sarah studied the map again. I want to talk to those kids, and I want to see this well. Webb stood, his chair scraping against the floor. I figured you'd say that, but there's something else you should know. What? He walked to the window, staring out at the empty street. Emma's not the first person to disappear near that well. Over the years, we've had 4 others. A hunter in 1978, a couple of teenagers in 1993, and 5 years ago, a real estate developer who was scouting the area for a new subdivision. 5 people? Sarah stood. And you're just telling me this now, because there's nothing to investigate. Webb turned back to her, and she saw something in his eyes she didn't like. Fear. Every case was ruled as voluntary disappearance or accidental death. No bodies were ever found, no evidence of foul play. People in this town, we don't talk about Hartwell, and we don't talk about that well. Why not? Because some secrets are meant to stay buried, Detective. Sarah met his stare. Not on my watch. That is. The 3 teenagers sat in the Millbrook Ridge High School library, looking like they'd aged 10 years in 6 days. Sarah had insisted on interviewing them together, wanting to see if their synchronized story would crack under gentle pressure. Tyler Morrison, the quarterback with a scholarship offer from Penn State. Jessica Huang, student council president with a permanent spot on the honor roll. And Brett Kowalski, Emma's older brother, whose eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. Sarah pulled up a chair, keeping her voice soft. I know you've told this story before, but I need to hear it again. Take your time. Tyler glanced at the others before speaking. We went out there Saturday afternoon. It was supposed to be a quick hike. Maybe take some pictures for Emma's photography project. She's really into abandoned places. Was, Brett corrected, his voice cracking. She was into them. She is, Jessica said firmly, reaching over to squeeze Brett's hand. Don't talk about her like she's dead. Sarah made a note. What time did you arrive at Hartwell? Around 2:30, Tyler said. The trail's not marked anymore, but we've been out there before. It's maybe a 3-mile hike from the old logging road. And what did you find when you got there? Jessica spoke up. Most of the buildings are just foundations now. Some rotted wood, broken glass, but the well house is still there. It's this stone structure, maybe 8 feet tall, with a peaked roof that's mostly collapsed. The well itself has a wooden cover, but someone, probably teenagers over the years, had pried up one side. Emma wanted to look inside, Tyler continued. She said she'd read something online about Hartwell, some old story about the well. Sarah leaned forward. What story? The teenagers exchanged glances. Brett spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, that people used to throw things down there, things they wanted to forget. What kind of things? She didn't say, just that there were rumors, local legends. Sarah nodded. So Emma decided to climb down. Did any of you try to stop her? Of course we did, Jessica said defensively. But Emma, when she got an idea in her head, there was no talking her out of it. She found an old rope tied to a support beam, tested it, said it seemed solid. Before we could really argue, she was already over the edge. Describe what happened next. Every detail. Tyler closed his eyes, remembering. She had her phone, using the flashlight. We could hear her calling up to us as she descended. The rope was creaking, but it held. When she reached the bottom, she said the floor was covered in leaves and debris. She started moving around, looking at the walls. Then she said she saw something. Jessica added. An opening in the wall, like a gap between the stones. What kind of opening? Small, she said, maybe 2 feet wide. But there was something behind it. She said she could feel air moving. Brett's hands clenched into fists. I told her to come back up. I had this feeling, this sick feeling in my gut, but she wouldn't listen. She said she could squeeze through, just wanted to see what was back there. And then she screamed. Tyler's voice shook, not like she was scared, like she was in pain. We all rushed to the edge, shouting her name. I pointed my phone down, and the light hit the bottom of the well. But Emma wasn't there, just her phone, lying on the ground, still on. What did you do? I climbed down, Brett said. Use the same rope. When I got to the bottom, I searched everywhere. The well is just a circular stone shaft, 30 feet deep, maybe 8 feet across. There's nowhere to hide. I checked the opening Emma mentioned, but it was tiny, just a gap where some mortar had fallen out. You couldn't fit more than your arm through it. Did you see any other openings, passages? Nothing, just solid stone. Sarah studied each of their faces. They were telling the truth, or at least what they believed was the truth. Why did you wait so long to call 911? Jessica flushed. We didn't know what to do. If we called the police, they'd ask why we were out there. Brett's only 18, we're all minors. We were scared we'd get in trouble. So we searched, Tyler said. For maybe an hour, we searched the entire area, calling Emma's name, looking for any sign of where she could have gone. When we didn't find anything, we finally called. Sarah closed her notebook. Is there anything else? Anything you saw or heard that seemed unusual? The teenagers shook their heads. But Sarah noticed Brett's jaw tighten. Saw the way his eyes flickered toward the window. He was holding something back. Brett, she said gently, your sister's life might depend on what you tell me. If there's something, anything you need to say, now's the time. Brett looked at his friends, then back at Sarah. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. When I was down in that well, looking for Emma, I smelled something wrong. What kind of smell? Old, like a basement that's been closed up for 100 years. And there was something else. He swallowed hard. I heard breathing, not mine, deeper, coming from somewhere in the walls. Tyler and Jessica stared at him. You didn't tell us that, Jessica said, because I thought I was losing my mind, because it doesn't make any sense. Brett looked at Sarah with desperate eyes. But I know what I heard. Something was down there with me, something alive. The drive to Hartwell took 45 minutes along increasingly deteriorating roads. Chief Webb had insisted on accompanying Sarah, though she got the sense he would have preferred to be anywhere else. The forest pressed close on both sides, ancient oaks and maples just beginning to turn orange and gold. You married, Detective? Webb asked, breaking the silence. Divorced. 3 years now. Kids? No. Sarah kept her eyes on the road. You? Wife died of cancer 8 years back. 2 daughters. Both moved away soon as they graduated. Can't say I blame them. He pointed to a faded logging road. Turn here. Sarah guided the explorer onto what was barely more than 2 ruts in the earth. Branches scraped against the windows. The sky had darkened further, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Why'd you really call me, Chief? A missing teenager, you could handle that yourself. You've been doing this job long enough. Webb was quiet for a long moment. Because I'm too close to it. And because, he exhaled slowly, because I knew Emma's grandfather. Knew? Thomas Kowalski. He was chief of police here before me. Good man, fair man. He's the one who investigated the disappearances in '93. Those 2 teenagers I mentioned. What happened to him? Retired in '95. Moved to Florida with his wife. But before he left, he gave me some advice. He said if anyone ever went missing near Hartwell again, I should call in outside help. Someone who didn't grow up here. Someone who wouldn't be afraid to look. Afraid of what? Webb didn't answer. They'd reached a small clearing where the forest had reclaimed most of what man had built. Crumbling foundations poked through the undergrowth like broken teeth. A rusted-out truck chassis sat half-buried in mud, and in the center of it all stood the well house, exactly as the teenagers had described. Sarah parked and grabbed her gear. Flashlight, rope, first aid kit, camera. Webb moved more slowly, his hand resting on his service weapon. The well house looked like something out of a fairy tale, if fairy tales were about decay and abandonment. Stone walls covered in moss, the peaked roof sagging inward, wooden beams black with rot. The well cover had been pulled aside, revealing the dark circle of the shaft. Sarah approached carefully, testing each step. The ground around the well was churned up with footprints. The teenagers, the responding officers, probably dozens of curious locals over the years. She knelt at the edge and shined her flashlight down. The beam cut through darkness, illuminating rough stone walls slick with moisture. 30 feet below, the bottom was visible, just as Brett had described, a circle of earth and dead leaves. Emma's phone sat in the center, still faintly glowing. "We sent 2 men down there," Webb said from behind her. "Searched every inch. Found nothing but that phone." Sarah studied the rope the teenagers had used. It was old but still sturdy. Probably climbing rope from the 1980s or 90s. Someone had tied it securely to a support beam. "I'm going down," she said. "I really don't think that's a good idea." "Your opinion is noted." Sarah clipped a carabiner to her belt and began to descend. The rope creaked but held. As she lowered herself into the shaft, the temperature dropped noticeably. The air smelled of earth and stone and something else, something organic and wrong, just as Brett had described. The walls were slick with moisture despite there being no water source, covered in some kind of pale fungus that seemed to pulse in her flashlight beam. Her feet touched bottom. The ground was soft, almost spongy. She unclipped and began a systematic search, photographing everything. The well was exactly as reported. Circular, about 8 feet in diameter, with walls of carefully fitted stone. No visible passages. No hidden chambers, just solid construction from an era when people built things to last. Then she found the gap Brett had mentioned. It was low on the wall, maybe 2 feet above the floor, a space where several stones had fallen away, leaving an irregular opening about 2 feet wide. Sarah crouched and shined her light through. Behind the stones was darkness, not just the absence of light, but something deeper, a space that her flashlight beam seemed to die in rather than illuminate. She could feel air moving through the gap, cool and damp and carrying that wrong smell. Sarah pulled out her phone and started recording. "Detective Brennan, October 27th, 3:47 p.m. I'm at the bottom of the Hartwell well. I've located an opening in the wall, approximately 2 feet wide." She moved closer, aiming the light and camera through the gap. "The opening appears to lead to some kind of cavity behind the well shaft. I'm going to—" Something moved in the darkness beyond. Sarah jerked backward, her heart hammering. She replayed the phone video, slowing it down. There, for just a fraction of a second, a shape, pale and quick. "Detective?" Webb's voice echoed down from above. "Everything all right?" Sarah steadied her breathing. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm going to try to look through this opening. Stand by." She positioned herself and squeezed her head and shoulders through the gap. Her flashlight revealed a space beyond. Not large, maybe 6 feet deep and 10 feet long. A cavity between the well shaft and the surrounding earth, probably created when the original builders dug the foundation. The floor of the cavity was covered in objects. Bones, old ones yellowed with age. Animal bones, Sarah thought at first. Then she saw a skull, unmistakably human, half buried in the dirt. And another, and another. "Oh, Jesus," she whispered. The cavity was a burial site. Bodies had been pushed through gaps in the well wall and left to decompose in the darkness. How many? She couldn't tell. Dozens, maybe. The bones were jumbled together, mixed with scraps of fabric and metal, buttons, belt buckles, a tarnished wedding ring. Sarah pulled back, her mind racing. This wasn't just a missing persons case. This was a mass grave. She was about to call up to Webb when she heard it. The sound Brett had described. Breathing, slow and deep, coming from somewhere in the cavity. Sarah froze. She aimed her flashlight back through the gap, sweeping across the bones. Nothing moved, but the breathing continued, growing louder. Then she saw it. At the far end of the cavity, partially hidden behind a collapsed section of stone, was another opening. Smaller than the first, barely large enough for a person to squeeze through. And from that darkness came the breathing. Something was back there. Something alive. Sarah's police training kicked in. This is Detective Sarah Brennan. If someone's in there, identify yourself. I'm armed and I'm calling for backup." The breathing stopped. In the sudden silence, Sarah heard something else, a scraping sound, something moving through dirt and stone, coming closer. She scrambled backward, pulling herself out of the gap. "Webb, call for backup, now! We need—" A hand shot through the opening, pale, filthy, fingernails caked with dirt. It grabbed Sarah's ankle with impossible strength. Sarah screamed and kicked, her boot connecting with something solid. The hand released her and she scrambled back, drawing her weapon. "Stay back! Do not come through that opening." But the hand didn't withdraw. Instead, it braced against the edge of the gap, and then a face appeared. Emma Kowalski stared at her with eyes that didn't blink. The girl's face was smeared with dirt and something darker. Her hair hung in matted clumps. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, but it was her eyes that made Sarah's blood run cold. They were empty, like someone had scooped out everything that made her human and left just the shell. "Emma?" Sarah kept her gun trained on the girl. "Emma, can you hear me?" The girl's mouth opened. What came out wasn't words, but a sound like wind through a cave. Then, slowly, she began to pull herself through the gap. "Stop! Don't move." Sarah backed up until she hit the wall of the well shaft. Emma kept coming. Her movements were wrong, jointless, like a snake squeezing through a crack. She pulled her body through the opening that should have been too small, her bones seeming to compress and reform. It took maybe 30 seconds. When she was through, she stood in the well bottom with Sarah, swaying slightly. "Emma, I'm Detective Brennan. I'm here to help you. Can you tell me what happened?" The girl's head tilted at an unnatural angle. Then she smiled. It was the worst thing Sarah had ever seen. "She's not here anymore," Emma said in a voice that sounded like gravel scraping stone. "She went deeper." "What are you talking about? Where's Emma?" "She went to meet them. The ones who've been waiting, the ones we fed." Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. "Who are you?" "I'm what's left. The hollow, the echo." The girl took a step forward. "You want to know what happened here? What really happened? Tell me." "Hartwell wasn't abandoned because the lumber ran out, Detective. It was abandoned because the people here did something terrible. Something that required payment." The girl's smile widened. "They built this well in 1889, but it wasn't for water. It was for disposal." Sarah felt ice spreading through her chest. Disposal of what? The unwanted, the inconvenient, pregnant girls who brought shame to their families, workers who got injured and couldn't work anymore, drifters who no one would miss. For 63 years, Hartwell's good Christian folk brought their problems to this well. They threw them down into the dark, and the dark accepted them. The girl gestured to the gap in the wall. 37 people. That's how many they killed, but they made one mistake. The last one they threw down here, a woman named Margaret Thorne. She was pregnant, 9 months pregnant, and when she hit the bottom, when she died, her baby didn't. Sarah's mind reeled. That's impossible. Is it? In the dark, in the cold, in the silence, that baby survived, fed on its dead mother, fed on the corpses around it, grew into something else, something that learned to wait, to call, to whisper to the people above. You're saying Emma was lured down here by what? Some kind of monster? The girl laughed, a sound like breaking glass. No, Detective, not a monster. A family. What? That baby had children, and those children had children. They've been breeding down here for 70 years, in the tunnels beneath Hartwell, in the spaces between the earth. A whole community living in the dark, fed by the occasional lost hiker, the curious teenager, just enough to survive. Sarah's weapon wavered. That's insane. Is it? You've seen the bones. You've heard the breathing. You know I'm telling the truth. The girl stepped closer. And now Emma's one of them. She went willingly, crawled through that passage, down into the deep places. They were so hungry, Detective, so very hungry. And she was so tender. Sarah fired. The bullet caught the girl in the chest, dead center. She staggered backward, but didn't fall. Instead, she looked down at the wound, which leaked something dark and viscous that wasn't quite blood. "That was rude," the girl said. Then she lunged. Sarah managed one more shot before the girl was on her, hands like iron clamps around her throat. They fell, thrashing in the dead leaves. Up close, Sarah could smell the decay, see the wrongness of the girl's skin, too pale, too cold, like meat left too long in a refrigerator. "Webb!" Sarah choked out, her vision starting to dim. "Webb, help!" A gunshot thundered in the confined space. The girl's head snapped to the side, and she released Sarah, who gasped for air. Webb stood at the edge of the well above, his service weapon extended. "Get out of there!" he shouted. "Now!" Sarah scrambled for the rope, but the girl was already recovering, turning toward her with that terrible smile still fixed on her face. Sarah grabbed the rope and hauled herself upward with strength born of pure terror. The girl followed. She didn't use the rope. She simply pressed her hands and feet against the wall and began to climb, moving like a spider. Sarah climbed faster than she'd ever climbed in her life. She could hear the girl below her closing the distance with impossible speed. 30 feet, 25, 20. Webb fired again, the bullet sparking off stone just inches from the girl's head. She didn't even flinch. 15 feet, 10. Sarah's arms screamed in protest. 5 feet. Webb reached down and grabbed her wrist, hauling her up and over the edge. Sarah rolled away from the well, just as the girl's hand appeared over the lip. "Run!" Webb shouted. They ran. Behind them, the girl emerged from the well with a fluid motion. She stood in the rain, which had intensified into a downpour, and watched them flee toward the explorer. Her smile never wavered. Sarah fumbled with her keys, nearly dropping them. Webb yanked open the passenger door and dove inside. Sarah jammed the key into the ignition, and the engine roared to life. The girl walked toward them, unhurried. Sarah threw the explorer into reverse and floored it, tires spinning in the mud before finding purchase. They rocketed backward down the overgrown road, branches shattering against the windshield. Sarah didn't stop until they hit the main logging road. She slammed the brakes, threw it into drive, and accelerated toward town. Neither of them spoke for several minutes, both breathing hard. "What the hell was that?" Sarah finally managed. Webb stared straight ahead, his face pale. "Something that should have stayed buried." "You knew." Sarah's voice was cold. "You knew something was down there." "I suspected. Thomas Kowalski, before he left, he told me things. Stories about Hartwell that the old-timers knew but never spoke about. About the well, about what they did there." Webb's hands shook. "I didn't want to believe it, chose not to believe it. And now Emma's gone, taken by whatever that was." "That wasn't Emma," Webb said quietly. "You know that, right? Emma's dead. That thing wearing her face, it's something else." Sarah's mind raced through everything she'd seen, trying to make sense of it. The bones, the cavity, the thing that had attacked her. Those stories about people living in the dark, breeding in the tunnels. Is that possible? I don't know. But I know Hartwell sits on top of old coal mines and natural caves, miles and miles of passages. If something was down there, if it found a way to survive. He trailed off. They drove in silence for a few more minutes before Sarah spoke again. "We need to seal that well. Fill it in with concrete. Make sure nothing else comes out." "Agreed. And we need to tell Emma's family something. We need to tell them—" Sarah stopped. "What do we tell them?" Webb's expression was grim. "We tell them we're still searching, that we haven't given up hope, because the alternative, explaining what really happened down there, nobody would believe us. And even if they did, it would destroy this town. The shame of what our grandparents did, what we've been covering up for 70 years. You want me to lie? I want you to be practical. Emma Kowalski is gone, dead or worse, but we can save the rest of this town from that knowledge. We can spare them." Sarah pulled over to the side of the road and killed the engine. She turned to face Webb. "You said there've been 4 other disappearances over the years. 4 other people who went near that well and vanished. Were they all like Emma? Were they all taken by those things?" Webb nodded slowly. "And you just let it happen. You knew there was something down there, something dangerous, and you let children go hiking in those woods. We tried to keep people away. We made it clear that Hartwell was off limits. But teenagers don't listen. They never listen. So this is what you do in Millbrook Ridge. You sacrifice a kid every few years to keep your secret safe? It's not like that. Then what is it like?" Sarah's voice rose. "You called me here to help find Emma, but really, you called me here to help cover it up, to put a fresh coat of paint on your town's sins." Webb met her eyes, and she saw the weight of decades in his gaze. "I called you here because I'm a coward, detective. I'm 63 years old. I've lived in this town my entire life, and I've known about Hartwell since I was 25. And in all that time, I never once had the courage to do what needed to be done. I never went down into that well, never tried to find those people, never told the truth." His voice cracked. "I called you here because I hoped you'd be brave enough to do what I couldn't." Sarah stared at him for a long moment. Then she started the engine. "We're going back." "What?" "We're going back to that well. We're going down there with lights and cameras and evidence bags. We're going to document every bone, every scrap of clothing, every piece of evidence. And then we're going to find those passages, those tunnels, and we're going to see if Emma's really gone, or if there's still a chance to save her. That's suicide, maybe, but it's the job. It's what we're supposed to do." Sarah pulled back onto the road heading toward town. "We'll need proper equipment, backup. Maybe call in the state police and tell them what? The truth, or at least enough of it. There's a mass grave at Hartwell. 37 victims. That part's provably true. What happened to those people, how they ended up there, we can investigate. And if we happen to find Emma alive in the process, even better." Webb was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "All right, but we do this carefully. We bring in people we can trust, and we make sure we're prepared for whatever we might find down there." They reached Millbrook Ridge as the sun set, painting the clouds blood red. Sarah parked at the station and followed Webb inside. He immediately got on the phone, calling in favors, arranging for equipment and personnel. Sarah sat at an empty desk and opened her laptop. She needed to file a preliminary report, document what they'd found. But as she started typing, something made her pause. The photograph of Emma, the girl who'd climbed out of that well wearing Emma's face. Sarah enlarged the image on her screen, studying every detail, and that's when she saw it. Behind Emma in the photo, barely visible in the background blur, was a window, and reflected in that window was another figure, an adult standing just out of frame. The reflection was too indistinct to make out clearly, but something about the posture, the shape, made Sarah's blood run cold. She pulled up the witness statements from the teenagers again. Read through them carefully. There was something there, something she'd missed the first time. A detail that didn't quite fit. Brett had said he searched the well for an hour, but Tyler's statement said they'd searched for maybe 45 minutes. Jessica's statement said 30 minutes. Small discrepancies, easy to overlook. But Sarah's instincts were screaming now. She pulled out her phone and dialed Brett's number. It rang 4 times before he answered. "Hello? Brett, it's Detective Brennan. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay. When you were down in that well, searching for Emma, you said you heard breathing. Where exactly did it come from?" A long pause. "From the wall, the opening. You're sure? Not from above you? Not from someone standing at the edge of the well?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Detective, what are you asking me?" Sarah's mind raced through the implications. "Brett, was anyone else out there with you that day? Anyone besides you, Tyler, Jessica, and Emma?" "No, I mean, we didn't see anyone, but what?" "Emma said something right before she climbed down. She said she'd arranged to meet someone who knew about Hartwell, someone who'd promised to show her the truth." "Who?" "She wouldn't tell us, said it was a secret. I thought she was just being dramatic, you know. Emma was always—" His voice broke. "God, do you think someone was down there? Someone who hurt her?" Sarah closed her eyes. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture she desperately didn't want to see. "Brett, I need you to do something for me. I need you to think very carefully about everyone Emma talked to in the weeks before she disappeared. Teachers, family members, friends. Anyone who seemed particularly interested in her photography project about abandoned places. There was someone. A guy who worked at the Historical Society. Emma went there to research Hartwell, get old photographs and stuff. She mentioned him a few times, said he was really helpful, gave